Welcome. In this module, we are going to discuss on the Howard-Sheth model of consumer decision making. Howard-Sheth model is the most coveted and widely used model in consumer behavior, and this was formulated by eminent professors John A. Howard and Howard-Sheth in the year 1969. This model is highly significant and distinct from the other models, as it puts forward the relevance of input of consumer buying process and comments the way in which the customer organizes and interprets these inputs before arriving at a final decision. And it also takes into account the exogenous variables which may intermingle with the learning and perceptual constructs. So, this model is structured in 3 levels of decision making, and it looks like an input, process and output model. I will explain it. First is the input part. The input constructs are comprised of 3 different types of stimuli. One is the information sources in the consumer environment. The marketers at this phase usher the customers with different kind of product and brand related information in terms of physical brand characteristics, which we call significative stimuli, like the price of the brand, the particular attributes, say the size of the brand, the ingredients of the brand. So, all this, and then the verbal and visual traits of the brand may be symbolic stimuli, the color, the logo, all these things. On the other hand, the social environment of the consumer, that is the family, reference group and social class, significantly influences the consumer's black box and is referred as social stimulus in the consumer decision making process. Now, together these 3 types of stimuli endows the customer with inputs related to the traits of product class as well as brands. Now, how do we process this information? So, we understood that we receive 2 kind of information, symbolic and significative, from 3 sources. One is the marketer driven sources, another is a social stimulus. I will just show here. It is this significative cue, symbolic cue and the social stimuli. The significative and symbolic cue is driven by the marketer and social cue is provided by the peer groups. What my peer groups are using, what kind of aspirational influence I am having from my reference group, and this part is significative cue, but product they are talking about their price, designs, value added services. Symbolic cues, that is price quality myth, then some kind of perception about some after sale service, or maybe I am connecting with a very high end celebrity. So, it shows that my brand is an elegant brand, my logo, my color, all these things probably are the symbolic cues. So, this is first is my input part, then followed by is how do I process the inputs. So, similar to the consumer black box concept, the most fundamental part of this model also consists of psychological variables which is involved when the consumer is envisioning a decision. The perceptual variables, there are 2 things, one is the perceptual variable, another is the learning variables here, learning constructs. So, the perceptual variables here determine how the customer interprets the information from the input stimuli, memory and other sources. Improper comprehension of the environmental stimuli may result in stimulus ambiguity. And further, consequence of the stimulus ambiguity is perceptual bias, which is formed when the customer distorts the information received in a way it fits with the established needs or experience. Now, while mentally processing the information or stimuli received from the environment, the customer may resort to some of the other decision making parameters, which is known as the learning construct. Now, the learning constructs include the confidence about the product and the brand, my readiness state as a buyer, which means my intention to purchase, what is my motivation behind the choice, what are my different evaluative criteria for choosing a brand, how do I comprehend a brand, do I comprehend a brand BMW as a brand of elegance, or whether I comprehend the brand BMW from the roadster car, that if the BMW is a roadster maker, so it must be a sports car, sports utility vehicle kind of thing. So, how do I perceive about how do I comprehend a brand? and the level of perceived satisfaction. What do I expect from a brand? Okay. And what I have previously explained experienced from a particular brand. If I went to a particular restaurant, what was my prior experience about that restaurant? The possible interface among the perceptual and learning constructs endows the model with considerable improvement over the traditional models. However, some of the exogenous variables which are not direct part of the decision making process pose some influence on the importance of the purchase and consumer, like these are the consumer's own personality trait, the religion, time pressure, etc. These also have some influence on the choice decision making, which has not been addressed in the Nicosia model. Now, the last part is the output part, and these outputs are the resultant behavior of the customers exposed in the marketplace based on their interpretation of the received environmental stimuli to the interface of perceptual and learning construct. And this response behavior can be attention, brand comprehension, attitude, and finally, the purchase intention. So, I will explain this entire thing which I have just mentioned now theoretically. I will explain it with a real time research which was done by one of my students as this project, and this has been incorporated in my book. So, I am just referring to that. In 2010, this study was conducted to analyze the constructs of the Howard-Sheth model with respect to the purchase of high-tech mobiles amongst the 21st century youths of Kolkata, one of the biggest metropolitan cities in the world. Now, this was a qualitative study. So, for this purpose, 4 focus group interviews were conducted with around 36 respondents, and observations were explained with the Howard-Sheth model of consumer behavior. And the respondents were of age group of 24 to 37, high salaried management graduates and engineers working mainly in sector 5, Salt Lake City, Kolkata. The survey results can be grouped into the following subsection. First is, what is the kind of purchase behavior I am talking about? This is a high-tech mobile I am saying. So, this is a relatively high price product. So, therefore, by nature it is a high involvement product. So, as because the purchase price is high, and secondly it also portrays the esteem need whenever you are handing a high-tech mobile, it also shows how much tech savvy you are, all this thing. So, therefore, the customer's involvement in this purchase is very high, it is a high involvement product, and therefore, as I discussed in the previous module, that for high involvement product, or we call it an extensive problem solving behavior, and in that extensive problem solving behavior, we therefore, all the 5 stages of decision making would be visible. That is need recognition, information search, evaluation of alternative, purchase and post purchase, all these 5 would be visible. Now, we look at this, what has happened in this case. We can clearly see there are 4 major fields here. One is the input part, that is the stimulus display part, when customer is disposed to the messages, they are exposed to the messages, and then this is the perceptual, this is the black box where you have perceptual constructs and learning construct, and this is the output part when the message catches the attention of the customer, and finally, the customer takes a decision to purchase. In between, there are some exogenous variables which influence the learning constructs as well as which influence the output part. Now, stepwise we are discussing. First is the input part. The Sheth model specifies 3 types of stimuli named significative, symbolic and social stimuli. In this case, the 2 most important stimuli were the social and significative cues. It is also identified that the significative and symbolic stimuli can be identified mainly from family and reference groups, especially the peer group, and several non-personal information sources like advertisement and internet. As the concern, this is for this particular research, this has come like that. It may be other thing also, it may be only the marketer driven stimuli having more influence on the customer, that can also happen, but in this particular research it came out that it is the this particular stimuli, that is the peer pressure, which is acting as the most important source of information. Anyway, this kind of stimuli that motivated the customer and the other kinds of stimuli that motivated the customers were designs, features, trends, value added services of the mobile. Significative cues which has had an influence on the customer were price and quality, and moreover, staying in one of the biggest metropolitan cities, availability of the new model is more or less ensured, and hence this parameter was not a matter of concern for them. However, esteem needs seem to be prioritized among 80% of the respondent. So, this we understood now. The significative cues used are the price, designs, value added features, and whatever messages has been communicated through mass media, symbolic, after sale service, and price, quality, and social is whatever the celebrities are using or whatever my peer groups are using. So, these are the first part. We move to the next part, that is the perceptual construct. In perceptual construct, we can see here what are the elements. One is the overt search, when we, which means exclusively when the customers search information, they will search from all this stimulus input display only, and from there they become well educated and informed, and then the rest we will discuss. So, they gather the information from the stimuli actively, and then another part comes here, that is the stimulus ambiguity. Stimulus ambiguity is evident from the study that the respondents grasp pretty well information obtained from various sources regarding the mobile phones, and in this particular study there was no confusion about the attributes of the product. So, sometimes there is some kind of stimulus ambiguity about the product. For example, when Horlicks Foodles came, so they started saying that this is unhealthy noodles, but how it is healthy noodles, that was not very clear. Whereas, when Maggi came with oats noodles or Maggi came with atta noodle, so they made it clear that oat is a healthy product. So, we are mixing up oat with this product. So, therefore, it is becoming healthy, because it will then have the values which oat or the nutritional value which oats has. And again, if atta, which means it is a kind of whichever the nutritional value which Maggi which can be obtained from flour or the atta. But in this case for Foodles it was not very clear. So, therefore, and noodles by definition, by in general assume that it is a kind of fast food, so not so healthy. So, now the product which is not so healthy and you are saying that it is healthy noodles, so how do you establish that? That connection was not very clear. So, therefore, there was some kind of stimulus ambiguity in the mind of the customer. Customer could not perceive what is healthy noodles in this case, and why are you calling it healthy? Okay. So, but in this particular case, since these are the tech savvy customers and we are talking about the technical attribute of the product, so therefore, this kind of confusion was not there. Then regarding the attention, we asked two questions mainly to them. One question is, do they remember the logo of the preferred brand? They said yes, we remember. And do they remember the brand ambassador? But in this case the response was mixed. Some people said no, brand ambassadors we do not remember. Some remembered the brand ambassadors, but yes, they are mainly focusing, like they are saying that we like Nokia or Samsung phone at that time, because it is in 2010. So, Nokia and Samsung were their most preferred brand, even if many of them could not remember about the brand ambassadors, but they mainly relied on Nokia because of its quality. Samsung, they say most of the customers, those who have talked about Samsung phone, they talked about the style, because that time stylish was coming. So, therefore, they said that okay, Samsung is good in their style and Nokia is very durable. So, this is how they were perceiving it, not mainly because of any celebrity or anything, it was mainly the attribute of the product by which they were selecting. So, assume that these customers are quite a rational group of customers. So, next is the perceptual bias in this case. Now, perception as its definition goes is the process by which an individual selects, organizes and interprets stimuli into a meaningful and coherent picture of the concerned product. However, the customer is in the process of decision making to buy a certain product whenever then it is common that he or she distorts the information received in such a way that fits his or her established needs and experience. The perceptual bias can occur as a result of previous experience or preconceived ideas about something, and this will eliminate several brands or models. for example, if my prior mobile handset was Samsung and I had some problem with that mobile handset. So, while replacing the brand and buying a new while replacing the model and buying a new handset, my previous assumption that I have faced some problem with Samsung may act as a perceptual bias against Samsung. It may be just an isolated case that I have faced a problem, but that will actually create an halo effect on the choice of all Samsung phone, and maybe it may create an halo effect while I choose any other Samsung products, not even phone. It may be any other Samsung products. So, that also I mean it can overshadow like that. So, therefore, in this study actually it was observed that majority of the respondents thought Nokia was durable and sturdy, and some of them did not prefer phones with flip or touch screen, because they felt that flip after some time will become loosened, and it would be very difficult to every time in the crowd and all to open up the flip and all. And secondly, for touch screen they were little skeptical that time, because they thought that that after some time, after recurrent use, the touch screen may not work. So, it is better we get a keypad. So, this was the perceptual bias that touch screen will become. This was some kind of idea actually. Bias means I am not saying nothing wrong or right, because that is some kind of predisposed idea in the mind of the bias idea in the mind of the customers about this, that they think Nokia is sturdy, they think Nokia is durable. Maybe this has formed because of the communication message from the marketers. This might have formed because of my prior experience with the product. This may have formed by my friend's experience of using the product, or maybe the way shopkeeper has projected the product to me. So, we move to the next part, that is, after this perceptual bias has been formed, actually I move now towards developing attitude about the product. So, now from the perceptual construct we are moving towards the learning construct, that is this particular box. So, here the first one is motives, as you can see here, first one is these three motives we are talking about, these three are the motives. So, and when we talk about the motives, this is the first one. It is important to know about the motives for which the customer is contemplating to buy a certain product, and in the present study an attempt has been made to identify the motives of the respondent for which they wanted to buy a high-tech phone. So, what we have identified, first one is the esteem need, which was most important for them because they wanted to use it as a status symbol. Second one is the social need, they wanted to keep in touch with their near and dear ones. So, we have this is done. Now, we talk about the evaluative criteria. So, this one was the motive, second one was the evaluative criteria. So, we go to the evaluative criteria now, which in this particular case it was price. Price was revealed as the most important criteria for choosing the brand, and in this study 80% of the respondents found INR 10,000 to 20,000 as the acceptable price range for their high-tech phones, whereas 10% found 20,000 and above would be good, and the rest 10% was in favor of 7 to 10,000 range mobile phones, and majority was around 10,000. And then they talked about the functionality of the product. In 2010, at that point of time, they wanted mainly the functionality like the sturdiness and all this, and then the camera, music player, FM and all this, and somewhere they wanted some other facilities like internet, 3G and Wi-Fi facility in the mobile. So, and the motive actually this result is not very surprising. It has already been observed that for majority the motive for buying a mobile was either related to esteem need or belongingness need. So, we finished this two. So, for developing attitude, the first part was the motive, which we have discussed, it was social and key motive, and then we have talked about the evaluative criteria, where we are talking about the looks, value added services and other functionality as the choice criteria. Now, we move to the third aspect, that is the comprehension about the brand. So, this is the brand comprehension. Based on the motives and the choice criteria, the different brands under consideration would be comprehended. In that way, we have assumed that Nokia is a sturdy brand, Samsung is a stylish brand, Sony is again a very elegant brand, and Micromax is a relatively cheaper brand. So, this is how the 4 perceptions were formed that time, and the choice set was like this. Most positive perception was towards Nokia, followed by all these brands. So, we go back to this model and see that first what happened, the customer got all these cues. Okay. Marketer has provided symbolic and significative cues. They have also got social stimuli from their peer groups and aspirational groups through their overt search. Some of the stimuli they understood, some they may not. If the stimulus they do not understand, like poodles, then it results in stimulus ambiguity. Now, if the product is of high involvement of the customer, they pay more attention to that, and then comes into the perceptual bias. Through that it would be screened, that is whatever information and they are getting from overt search is sensitive towards their stimulus ambiguity, their level of attention, that is the involvement, and perceptual bias. Through this it would be filtered, and then the learning construct, that is attitude, would be formed. So, for that reason first determinant of this positive attitude is the motivations, and these two are the motives, social and esteem need. Then we talk about the evaluative criteria or the choice criteria, where we have talked about the features and all this. Then we are talking about the brand comprehension, and then these 3 can result in the positive attitude towards Nokia. Now, after that what happens is the confidence level of the customer. So, before a customer develops an intention to buy the product, he must have confidence in it, and as the present study is concerned with only high end and high priced mobile phones, and so the confidence of the customer on the chosen brand was extremely crucial. Most of the respondents took decision to buy a mobile themselves, and the time gap between the decision to buy the phone and the actual purchase was on an average a week. So, they brought handsets once they are very much confident with their purchase. Now, because what happens in this case, now this is very crucial when I am talking about the time gap, because within this time gap their peer groups can tell them about different features of the alternative brand, which may sound to them more attractive. In between, some new offers can come for some other brands. So, this time gap is very important. So, the marketer has to be very cautious about intimating their product features or whatever offers they are coming up with, and they also have to be very cautious about what kind of offers the competitors are making, because this is the phase where you may actually slip between the cup and the lip. Now, forms the intention to purchase. So, even if the customer has a positive attitude towards the brand and they are confident also, only 62% we have found they have an intention to buy a new high tech handset or replace their existing handset. Now, actually in between attitude formation and developing purchase intention, there could be several exogenous variables which I was talking about. So, therefore, the customer may finally have the intention to buy the product or may not have the intention to buy the product also. And these are mainly different exogenous variables like rise and fall of their income, a change in their job, their peer pressure, their family situation, any other exigency, their own personality parameters, and many other things which may actually act here, and many other conditional variables can also act. Now, finally comes the satisfaction. Satisfaction is the post purchase phenomenon. 85% of the respondents who had already purchased a high tech mobile seemed to be satisfied with their final purchase and agreed to recommend their phones to others as well. Now, is this output stage. So, this much we have understood, that there are the person has formed an intention to buy, but then is this output part, that is the last field, and as I have said, the exogenous variables has an implication. It may be the importance of purchase which plays role here also, and in confidence building also, in purchase intention also. So, one is the importance of purchase, how much it is important, then obviously I will be more involved to that and I will pay more attention. Personality variables, as I have already said, if I am well educated and well aware, then I can evaluate it much better in a rational way. My financial status may get changed, as I may change my job and all this. Time pressure, that is a conditional variable, and all this In this case, actually the in this particular study, exogenous variables did not create much hindrance. And finally, we are coming to the output part, where the respondents had paid positive attention to different input stimuli they are exposed to first. Then the stimuli in turn helped them to form positive brand comprehension. Then this positive brand comprehension combined with the brand attitudes fulfill the motives and choice criteria of the customer and form positive attitude about the brand in the customer's mind. And when the customers were pretty confident of the brand and the exogenous variable did not pose any hindrance, the customer formed a preference towards the brand Nokia, and finally, most of the customers were choosing Nokia brand. So, this much for today. Thank you, and in the next session we will discuss about the Angel-Kohler-Braithwaite model of consumer decision making.